I'm Little Richard.
This is Gloria Estefan from Miami Sound Machine.
Hi, we're Europe.
This is Taylor Swift.
This is Cliff Beach. You're listening to the Sounds of Christmas podcast.
Hi, I'm Ken Kessler, and welcome to the Sounds of Christmas podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I want to start by saying thanks for joining us. If you're not new, welcome back. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Now, to avoid any confusion, I want to start off by saying there won't be any music played here. This is a place for conversation. I'll talk about Christmas music and some related topics, sometimes by myself and sometimes with guests. If you're looking for music, just go to soundsofchristmas.com and click on the tree or the player on the front page or on the Listen Now page. We play the best variety of Christmas music all year long. Well, except in October, when we play the best variety of Halloween music. Very happy to have R&B singer-songwriter Cliff Beach back with us again this year. Cliff is also the host of the Deeper Grooves Radio Hour on the SoCal Sound, 88.5 FM, and also the author of Side Hustle and Flow, 10 Principles to Live and Lead a More Productive Life in Less Time, and Side Hustle and Flow, Shape Up, Hustle Harder, and Healthier. Hi, Cliff. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Ken. So happy to be here. I can't believe it's been a year already.
Yeah. And you've got a lot going on, a lot that has happened this year, and I want to try and cover as much of it as I can, but I got to tell you, I'm most excited about the new single just out, an original song and a cover, Every Christmas I Fall for You, and it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Which came first?
Oh my gosh, the chicken or the egg, the cart or the horse. They came kind of actually within the same week. So I worked with a licensing company in California who's gotten me placed on the CW and Sci-Fi Network and a bunch of cool stuff. And so every now and then I'll get kind of licensing briefs because, as you know, or maybe your listeners don't know, Christmas is amazing for songwriters. I mean, you look at someone like Mariah Carey, every year they're so happy that their Christmas song comes back around, or Michael Jackson with Halloween, his estate with Thriller, it comes back around. And so we get a lot of briefs specifically around Christmas music, and sometimes they're looking for original music, and sometimes they're looking for covers. And so that's really what kind of led me down this path, which is exciting because neither of these songs were on my radar when we talked a year ago. I wasn't thinking ever of doing either of these. And so these briefs came along, and one for the original was requesting a song kind of like kind of in the Norah Jones vein, but for holiday. And they wanted to talk about timeless love. And they were like, well, can you try and do something? And usually when those come along, you have about, I would say 24 hours to kind of write, perfect, produce, get a tangible work out to them so that they can do their thing. And then, we always spray and pray and put it out and hope it gets synced into a movie on Hulu or Tubi or Netflix or something. And so that's how that song came along. I worked with my longtime pianist that I've been working with at Disney, Greg Smith, who I've known for over 20 plus years in LA. He's one of my first LA music friends. And we live in the same area in Los Angeles. And so it was great because when you have the musical knowledge and musicality of understanding kind of like the structure of, the reference song that they sent us, and I've always loved Norah Jones since her debut and her work with Aaron Martin, and that was a diamond selling album in the early 2000s when people could actually still get CDs. So it was cool. I didn't realize actually they wanted to kind of based on this song called Turn Me On. For some reason, I just assumed that she had wrote it. And then when I actually looked into it, it was actually a song from the 60s that she had just redone for that album, Come Away With Me, which I didn't realize. And so, but they were like, oh, it's a little too much like her. Can you make some adjustments? So we did. And then finally, I was so happy. I think because when you don't have too much time to think about it, you just kind of do what you know, and it became kind of like this love song. Christmas music can sometimes lend itself to be a little bit cheesy, so I was trying to not do that. And so then as we pivot to the cover, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, which is written by Meredith Wilson, who did The Music Man, which was the high school musical that I did when I was a kid. And I've always loved the music from there, especially jazz songs like Till There Was You, which were covered by the Beatles and a bunch of other people. I was never thinking about doing that song, but in that brief, it had said, okay, we don't want it to be saccharine sweet like Bing Crosby or Perry Como, who originally did it. Nothing against them, but I wanted to be able to take some of the kind of not the McGuire sisters, but the background parts of that into the song. And we kept both of them very simple, so very organic. Not really electronic instruments, just regular sounding instruments. The cover is just guitar and vocal with my long-term engineer and guitarist Tim Hall. So it was exciting. It was just friends getting in the studio, having fun, really quickly kind of producing some content and seeing where it goes. But the fun for me was just kind of the curiosity of seeing these briefs saying, hey, I could probably do something pretty quick. Let's try something and seeing what happens is how everything happens, actually.
Was was did they specifically ask for it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, or was that something you picked?
No, they specifically wanted a cover of that song. And then in the brief, it just said, we would like this song, but the caveat is we want you to do it like more genuine and organic. We don't want it to be like syrupy, maple syrup elf sweet. We want it to be just kind of like more true to the spirit of the music. They didn't want to amplify or exaggerate it in the way they felt the older style of doing it was. So we were trying to do it a little bit modern. I was really trying to channel in that one, um, almost like a she and him, the Zoe Deschanel and M Ward duo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know you have more on the way, that you have a larger Christmas project. Was this part of that, or was this just something separate that led to that, or how did that all work?
It wasn't part of it, but it was during that same time. So somehow, whenever we get to the summertime, that's the time I start thinking about what's going to happen for Christmas because all great Christmas songs happen to be written like when it's hot. So yeah, so Greg and I, who had been working at Disney, he had written some Christmas songs that were very traditional, kind of jazz on the nose stuff, and he had played it for me a few different times. And so I asked him, I said, well, what if we took all those songs and we totally deconstructed them, flipped them, made them completely where you couldn't even recognize they were ever based on anything else? And so that's kind of the curiosity project that we have been currently working on. And so now we're going back and kind of changing lyrics and stuff. But we have a great kind of demos of all the flipped melodies and reharmonization of the chords and using different kind of electronic instruments and different sounds. So it was cool. It really took us down a rabbit hole and path, like hours and hours and hours in the studio, just trying all kinds of things and throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if it stuck. So we were hoping to originally package all that and have it with these tracks, but because we wanted to go back and redo the lyrics, we said, let's just put out these two singles as kind of like an A side, B side, digital 45 for Christmas this year, so that it gives us time into next year to finish those. But yeah, I anticipate that we're able to get to it and get it done because it was a lot of fun being in the studio and doing that. And so yeah, the first one that we did, this new original song, I think because we were always in the studio working on the other ones, that's how we were able to get it done in a couple of days because we were already kind of in the studio working on a bunch of Christmas stuff. So it wasn't directly a part of it, but it was adjacent to it because it was top of mind thinking about Christmas, which is why I was like, hey, we should do this now since it's kind of hot. Because I love working on something where it's like needed for something. So like it has a place to be plugged in because then it kind of gives all the kind of momentum behind it based on something bigger than you, especially if it does get picked up into a movie or something that you can promote. But the other ones are cool because sometimes they're deceptively, until we actually start talking about Christmas, you may not even know that it's a Christmas song. Like they sound very jazz or R&B, but very much in the vein of like a Robert Glasper or a Terrace Martin or Kamasi Washington. Like they're very like out there and wild, which is cool because I don't really hear a lot of Christmas music like that. But it's not about necessarily fitting a format or a program. It's actually the opposite of that. We're trying to be like, how anti-Christmas Christmas can we be to be like, we don't sound like anybody else for good reason because we already know we can sound like everybody else. We do that at Disney and other places, but we're like, well, what if we do something that's just completely different?
And speaking of completely different, these two songs versus the single that you released last year, gospel take on "O Come All Ye Faithful," and then the year before, Christmas Day Funk, all of them very different from each other.
Yeah, I always tell everybody, as you know, you've heard other projects outside of Christmas. I never try to do the same thing twice. When Michael Jackson put out Thriller, he wasn't trying to make Off the Wall 2, and he wasn't after putting out Bad making Thriller 2. And even people like, Taylor Swift, she has a new record out, and people are like, is it 1989 too? It's like, no artists, really good artists are trying to do that. You look at a Beyonce, it's like Cowboy Carter and then the Renaissance, they're completely different because you get interested in like a style or a genre or artists are chameleons. So for me, the curiosity of there's not anything exciting to me about doing the same thing exactly the same way twice. Even now I'm working on a covers album and we're doing a couple of mashups of some of my original songs that have been released on previous records. But all three of the ones that we've done so far sound very different from the original songs because when you're constantly playing them over and over, you're like, well, what if we did it this way? What if we did that way? And then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But through that process, you say, oh, this actually works really well. Let's do that. And you look at artists like Prince, you'll see how he would do it one way, and then live it was completely different. And then he wouldn't even do it the original way of the records anymore live at a certain point because it just wasn't interesting to him. So I think not all artists do it that way, but for me, I love being able to say, let's do it completely different and let's change this, let's change that. Let's not do this or not do that or add more of this or take away that. And you don't always know, like no one is there to see everything that didn't work. They just see the end process. But yeah, I think that really excites me when I can point to something and be like, oh, that was completely different. And even if you go back through my discography, every record before that, the jazz record, Beach Please, like the record before that, they're all special and nuanced and different. They have a through line of like they're all me in there, but they're all different. And that's why this original song with the cover, like they still work together because it's really like two people came into the studio and said, what's our best for that day? And whether it's original or cover, like how can we respect and honor where this came from and present it in the best light possible and give our gifts and talents in the most honest and authentic way we can.
And a really good example, I think, of what you're talking about are the two versions of I Put a Spell on You that you released this year, both of which listeners heard in October during the Sounds of Halloween. You had the version on the Four Strings EP, and then earlier this year from the Little Beach EP. Very different takes on the same song.
Yeah, and we're just there's a music video that'll be out as well. So people will be able to see that of the version from Little Beach. And so it was cool to be able to, because that was a cover of a song, and that song had been covered. Originally it was Screaming Jay Hawkins. Screaming Jay Hawkins became Screaming Jay Hawkins from that song. So the original version was more of a ballad, closer to the Nina Simone version that became more iconic. And then later in the 2000s, Annie Lennox covering it again, brought it back to the forefront. You also saw it in the Disney movie Hocus Pocus with Bette Midler. So that song gets used and covered a lot. But we wanted to be able to say, how can we take all of those things, but still make it a Cliff Beach thing? And so to be able to do it electronically and then organically with the strings, they are the same song, but they are different. And so it's nice because if you look at like all the Great American Songbook and Tin Pan Alley, those songs were supposed to be covered a lot, or songs by the Beatles or Jimi Hendrix, like they're supposed to be covered because a good song is a good song is a good song, no matter who does it and how they do it and whatever they add or take away. It's like a recipe. People, when you go online and you see a recipe for risotto, everyone's like, I added a little bit of white wine, I added a little bit of vinegar, I added a little, everyone's giving their spin to it. And that's the beauty of it, that it's all right to what tastes right to you. And that's what I want the listener to hear, and that's what I want people to go out and do. I think the most beautiful thing for an artist is to be able to do all these things and people love it and they grow roots and people cover it and get inspired by it. But ultimately, the other musicians and people pick up that torch and they say, I want to cover that too and do my own thing. That's what I would hope everybody would hear from hearing these different versions, that, these are just two of many that exist. And hopefully this inspires the next 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then that gets another 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 from other people. And I may never hear all of those versions, but if I can be the spark that reinvigorates that, then that's great. Because I was like, I don't think that Screaming Jay Hawkins could have known when he made the song that it would become so big and so iconic and be covered so many times. I don't think as an artist you can say you'll know that's going to happen, because you don't. You hope that it does, but you couldn't really say. And so, yeah, I love it, because just like all the stuff we do with Christmas, Halloween comes around every year. So if that becomes, my things in the Halloween zeitgeist lexicon that keeps circling back around, and maybe someone picks it up and they do want to be able to use it in something like a film, then that's exciting. You look at something like the movie and the series What We Do in the Shadows, and they picked up that song You're Dead from the 60s. I had never heard it before from that artist. But it came circled back around. So it's like, you never know 30 years from now, all this discography and things that I've done that I've maybe like moved on, people will be like, that's cool, or it's come back, or like, no one was thinking about that, and that was ahead of its time, and we should go take this and sample it, or we should put it in this film, or we should do our own version of what they did, because we're inspired. So all of those things, I think, are hopefully what these songs will do.
Yeah. For anybody who watches the show Wednesday on Netflix, that's what happened with the song Goo Goo Muck, which a lot of people didn't even know was an older song, and it became big when it was in this new TV series a couple of years ago, and there have been at least a dozen versions of it since then, because people are discovering it. And like you said, a lot of artists I want to put my spin on it. I want to, make it my song, but still honor the original. And, that's great when there's a song out there that just touches you and you want to do it, but you don't want to be the artist that did it before. You want to kind of make it your own. And I see that in Christmas songs so often, where I get so many versions of Jingle Bell Rock, and a lot of them are paint by numbers, the same thing. And then I'll get that one that is like, this is something different. It's still the song that everybody knows and loves, but it's different. And it sounds like whoever the artist is that did it. And I just think that's really cool.
No, yeah, it definitely is. And I think there's a place for all those things. But yeah, it definitely, especially if you're listening to so many, and it's the same with what you do and like the Spotify editorial playlists and stuff. They get so many of the same that it's really tough to be able to program sometimes, because you're like, okay, it just sounds like a carbon copy. It sounds like of what we've already heard the last 10, 20, 30 of them. And also, not all artists can push boundaries and be drastic and change and sound like them. Some people, they are great cover artists. They sound exactly like the other thing. And I've worked with them. I've had, a Bruno Mars cover band that I opened for, and they sounded just like Bruno Mars. And so, if you're not going to leave Palm Springs and that Bruno Mars tribute band is there, you probably won't see Bruno Mars because he doesn't play Palm Springs, and you'll be pleasantly happy with, that group. And so there's plenty of tribute bands and people that sound exactly like the bands. I taught a guy who was in a Red Hot Chili Peppers band, and so like I said, there's a place and a space for all the things. But yes, I do believe when you hear that one out of 50, 60 that stands out. I'm like, oh, that's a little more Jingle Bell hard rock. Okay, cool. That's interesting. I wasn't thinking that. When I heard the orchestra when they redid Carol of the Bells, and it's like, a lot of heavy guitar in there, in the 90s. That was a big deal, because you'd always heard it more kind of almost Gregorian chant, with singers, or just, purely classical. And so it was good. I remember that, the same in the 70s. They had a disco version of Beethoven's Fifth, a touch of Beethoven or whatever, and hearing that with guitars and strings, but in a 70s disco Studio 54 way was really cool. So I welcome it. But if it also sounds like exactly like the record, and I'm out at the coffee shop and I'm like, hey, that's cool. That's cool too.
I mentioned the Four Strings EP. This is another release that is so different from what you've done in the past. How did this come about?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Constellation Quartet that I worked with. Emily Moore, who runs that group, as the lead violinist, and Max Mueller with the umlaut, that is the arranger and cellist. They're just amazing. There's so many great quartets, very similar to the style of like the quartet that did a lot of stuff on the soundtrack for Bridgerton and stuff like that. But they're a little bit more than that. They're really great. They do a lot of great Disney stuff. They do a lot of pop tunes. But they were doing a series throughout the pandemic, working with different artists, and I was one of those artists that was able to work with them. And so we had done some shows. I had done a song for their Venice Sessions EP, and met the person where they recorded and everything. And during that session, we recorded a song for my Son of a Beach record, Wildflower with Strings. And so from there, we went and we did some more shows, and they said, hey, we're going to do a Halloween show, and can you do a song? I was like, well, let's do I Put a Spell on You. So that's where I Put a Spell on You started to get into my mix. And then we ended up not doing that show. So it kind of sat around. And then we ended up doing a show maybe a year later. And they were like, well, can we add some more songs? And I was like, well, we had some songs that we hadn't recorded, and we added a couple more. And then when that was all completed, I was like, well, we have at least 4 arrangements that are done. We should just record these. So that's essentially what happened. We went back into the studio a year ago, and I said, hey, let's just record these for posterity. Let's just have them, since we already did them. Because we do shows so infrequently, every 1 or 2 years. I was like, well, let's just record it. So we did. Everything sounded great. And then we just loaded it into kind of like the process of when we would put it out. Because obviously I've been putting out books and other records, and I'm always kind of like 6 to 12 months ahead. So that's why a year later, we're finally, it's out. But it was cool because it's great to have leading with that song during the Halloween time. So October is a great month to release that kind of stuff. And then also it's just with all the Grammys and voting and everything, and PR, you just want to have space. So as an artist, you really kind of say, okay, it's going to take time. It's nice to have the record kind of done. Everybody's heard it. We have time to get our work done. We have the space of like, okay, let's create the space to breathe and give it time, to be out there without too much kind of white noise in the background. But amazing musicians. I love working with them. I would definitely work with them again. And it's great because I think it pushes us both to do something different than what we would have done alone, because we're both so different as artists. And then we come together, especially when you hear us cover something like Betty Davis, funk with all strings. They say I'm different. Like it really encapsulates how I feel about being different, how she felt about being different, how this strings group feels about being different, how this record is different. Because if you listen to this record, I have listened to, I couldn't even tell you, countless amount of music, and I still have trouble telling people another record even close to it. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I mean, in terms of a soulful vocal with a string quartet, it's very rare, because it's a classical crossover that's a very small niche, sub niche group. I mean, I wish more people did it, but yeah, I really don't know. I'm sure there's a handful of string quartets. Usually it's like bigger orchestras. Usually it's like LA Phil with an artist and you have like a full orchestra. But in terms of just like a very intimate like quartet and a singer, there's not a lot of records doing it. And definitely not a lot, they kind of tend to lend to more pop or folk. There aren't a lot of like R&B with string quartets, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's almost like the ones I know of or the ones that I've heard are for the most part unremarkable, and I don't mean that to slam the singer or the strings. It's just that it's kind of when you say somebody is going to sing with a string quartet, it's kind of what's expected. But you really turn that on its head with this because you've got the strings and you've got I Put a Spell on You, which is, and that's just one of the songs, but it's it's an unexpected kind of thing and it works really well.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. And we thought so. Like when we played it in front of people, you could see people's faces light up, and they were like, "Oh wow, we never heard anything exactly like that. We didn't know what to expect." And I think that's great, And I think we should see more genre bending of different things because I think that's what makes it interesting. Like I think the fusion and crossover of music is what makes it more enjoyable. Because sometimes music can be kind of snobby or gatekeeping in certain ways, or people are like, well, they're a purist, and I've always been a hybrid. All my music, if you listen to it, like it's all hybrid genre. It's not any one thing. It's always at least two. And so I think that's just a product of my influences. I think that's a product of what I like, and I don't like the same thing. I knew a person literally they were just like they wore the same thing every day and they could eat the same meal every day and they were fine. They just, vanilla was their spice of life. And for me, I've always been a variety person. So it's like I'll walk a different path every day. I'll eat a different thing every day. I'll listen to something different every day. I will go somewhere to see something I've never seen before, just to say, "Hey, I've seen that." And that's all beneficial to me because it's like the world is so big and so vast and so interesting. Like for instance, I've studied things about Japan. I've never been, but I've studied, psychological principles and the food and the culture and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, they have this philosophy of like, if their ceramic breaks, they will repair it with gold to show people that like broken things can be beautiful. And that's something that's like, it's art, but also like economical and ecological. But the philosophy that like, you don't just throw something away because it's damaged, you take the effort and the time to restore it to its beauty. And that's just one thing, but it's like, if I don't ever study another culture outside of mine, I would never be able to see the beauty of that. And that's what I love about the fusion is that when I work with these people from the classical world, and now I'm part of a symphony board and stuff, and they teach me things and they show me things and connect me to music that I never did. And now to be able to help do free concerts, to give access to people from all walks of life and economics, social standpoints, to be able to hear that, even with my radio show, to be able to show these through lines of different genres, that's very exciting for me because I know if I'm learning something for the first time and I show it to people, it's probably a lot of people's first time.
That's it's just one of the things that I love about Christmas music that the rule book is almost thrown out with Christmas music. You can have a Christmas album out and you can have a classical track and you can have a rock track and you can have country and you can have all this stuff together and that's fine. But there seems to be when you go elsewhere, you go to traditional radio, they're very they want it in you fit in this box. What kind of music is it? It has to be this or it has to be that. And I think the truth is most people like a lot of different kinds of music. Some people, like you were talking about somebody who vanilla's the spice of their life. There are some people who, if it isn't country, I don't want to hear it. There are some people like that, but I think most like all the different kinds of music. And I think that's why radio stations that go all Christmas are so popular, and their ratings are so much better than they are the rest of the year. I think it's because a lot of people like a lot of different kinds of music, and that's the one of the few ways in traditional radio, at least, that you can get it. You can make a playlist, or you can listen to somebody else's playlist that has 10, 20 different genres of music on it. But to be able to get that from, almost from the mainstream is so rare. And it's what I think most people want.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing is that I think every artist worth their salt makes a Christmas record. I mean, even if they know nothing about Christmas, we have writers who were Jewish who never celebrate Christmas. They still were in that game because everybody loves it. Everyone loves the feeling that you get of it, and it's like from a Beyonce to a Dolly Parton to everybody, everyone will have at least a single or something. It's like if you've had a long enough career, holiday is going to come around, you're going to do something because every artist wants that, beyond Mariah Carey or Feliz Navidad or Jingle Bells or Rudolph or Frosty. Like everybody wants to be like, I made an iconic Christmas song. Like that's probably one of the top things, at least top 10 on the artist list. If you could be like, I've had a hit song, amazing. I had a hit Christmas song, I think it's even better because Christmas comes around every year. And even other parts of the year, people, they just want that Christmas feeling. Christmas in July, they'll listen to it 6 months before because I don't want to wait for Christmas. I mean, Christmas now, people are already listening to it in October and November, September. I start to see, Jingle Bells and stuff start ticking up. So it's exciting because you don't know when you make the song, it's going to be like, even a Donny Hathaway, like, I love this Christmas. And that song took years before it became like part of the real holiday, like getting replayed and redone all the time. It was done in the 70s, but it didn't really get popular into the 90s. So it can take time. But it's like Feliz Navidad, before that, there were no Spanish Christmas songs. And, there's that one Hawaiian one that Elvis and a bunch of people did. I never pronounced it right, but it's like, why is there only one? I think that's the thing now that we have to figure out is like, okay, just because we had one, let's have two. Why doesn't Gloria Estefan have an amazing Spanish Christmas song? Why doesn't Christina Aguilera have a Spanish, a Spanish one? I mean, we have so much of the speaking world. Now we have people like Bad Bunny doing the Super Bowl. Christmas song, reggaeton Christmas. People love that stuff. Macarena had a Christmas. It was exactly just like Macarena with the same two guys with the hats, same dance, but they had a sleigh bell. But I think we're gonna see that. I think we're gonna see more. Like we started to see Crazy Rich Asians and a lot of kind of Asian films, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and K-pop, monsters or whatever on Netflix. So yeah, we're gonna start seeing K-pop Christmas popping up. I'm sure you're seeing it. It's like the culture starts to dictate. We want more of that. We want to see those faces and that representation and holiday. So I'm excited about that. I mean, we've seen hip hop and rap and holiday, and so I think, yeah, we're gonna see some interesting kind of combinations. And I think, yeah, like the Grammys years ago, where you would see like, oh, we're gonna have Kendrick Lamar and Magic Dragon. Like, okay, is that gonna work? Will they? Won't they flop? We'll see a lot of that in Christmas too. We'll see a lot of pairs and duets and mashups of like, oh, those two genres and those two groups, I wouldn't think they would make a record, but it's Christmas and we allow it. So I'm excited to see what happens.
It's funny when you talk about Donny Hathaway and this Christmas that, that became something bigger 20, 25 years after. It's the same with Run DMC and Christmas in Hollis. When they released that, no radio station played it. And now it's now it's almost a hit again.
Yeah, I mean
How
that's
many
how it happens.
years? Yeah,
Yeah,
35 years later, give or take. Yeah, it
well, the
it is
Donny
amazing.
Hathaway is cool. The
Yeah.
Donny Hathaway is cool because it's like one of the only Christmas songs, and I think it's like it has this weird. Like he went to music school in DC, I think at Howard University, but and he went to school with Roberta Flack. But it has a bar of seven, which is the coolest thing, you know. Da 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 da. Like so, it's just missing one beat, and you just don't hear that. You know, usually things are very cookie cutter and very like
Hmm.
on the beat, mostly 4/4. And so to be like, hey, I'm gonna have this one bar of 7/8 before we get to the the 4/4. It's like most people they don't notice it. You know, it's like a time difference. Like you don't live the hour, it's fine. But for musicians and stuff, it's like, oh, that's like a little Easter egg because I've seen people where they're like, oh, we're gonna do it in 8, and you're like, it is actually 7, and when you hear it done right, you're like, that's interesting because it works, and you're like, it really shouldn't work, but it works.
It's funny that you say that because I think about covers of This Christmas that I've heard that people don't do it in seven, that they and it's somewhere between them making it their own, but it also, I don't know, doesn't sound quite right because the timing's a little off.
Hmm. And I have two versions of that. I have the acapella one, and I have the one with the band. So it's like we're always figuring out
Hmm.
ways of like, and they're completely different. But it's like, but I loved all the Take Six and Stevie Wonder and that Christmas stuff. And then I loved all like the band Donny Hathaway stuff. And so I think there's always room. There's always room for both. And so I know for me, like I've done work with Mestizo B and I've done work with other people. So I feel like as I get into holiday, I've done duets like with Heino La Rochelle and Alex Nestor, but I haven't done them in holiday. So I know we always talk about like what's next. I know I'm gonna work on the stuff with Greg, but I know some more duets are gonna happen and maybe holiday duets could be cool. I've never thought about it, but now I'm thinking about it. I say, oh, that'd be nice to have, me with a female counterpart doing something. So
You had mentioned that you're always 6 to 12 months ahead. Looking back, the beginning of this year was the release of your second book, and we should talk about that. I don't want to gloss over it. Shape Up. Was there always a plan for more than the first side hustle and flow?
yeah, there. Okay, so originally, no, I thought it was just like it was so hard to do the book, and it was a pandemic project. I was having to get this book out, and then that's it. I could say, hey, I always wanted to do a book, and my bucket list is fulfilled. And Shape Up was not on the radar, but I loved everything we did for Side Hustle and Flow. So we did the book, we did the hardcover, we did the soft cover, we did the audio book, we did the digital, we did the mini documentary, we did the Udemy course. We felt like, okay, let's just do all the bells and whistles, get it all out there. So I felt very complete, very fulfilled. And then in my own journey of getting my health together and losing 50 pounds and people asking me questions. So before that, I was thinking, okay, if I did a second book, I want to talk about the building blocks, like what habits did I create and cultivate within myself to be able to hustle and get things done. And I never ended up doing that. What ended up happening is that the second book became, if I had known about it, getting in shape, getting healthier, I would have more energy, more stamina to be able to get the things from the first book done. So that ended up becoming the audio book and then later the book of the second book. And then so actually, as I was building out, thinking, okay, I'd like to do a trilogy. The third book, which is coming out next year, top of January, is kind of a 365 daily bite-sized chunks. So really, it's super simple. It's just kind of a prompt, something you can read and digest for that day that helps just keep you kind of inspired and motivated for that day. Because sometimes reading a whole book, reading a whole chapter not everybody's going to commit to that. So this was like, hey, this takes less than 30 seconds, but it's just something on. You wake up in the morning, you look at it, and it just gives you something to think about in the background as you're doing other things. That still says, hey, how can I just do one thing to move the needle forward just a little bit? And so that's kind of how this trilogy now has wrapped up. So will I ever get to the book about habits? It's possible, but I'm kind of in the process of working on like a script idea that's kind of a trilogy of its own. So every time I tell my engineer or anyone I work with or you, I always say, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna stop doing so much. I'm gonna dial it back. I'm gonna take a break. And the moment my mouth says I'm gonna take a break, like 5 other things spring up. It's like, I want to do this new age record. I want to do a children's record. I want to do this blues record. I want to do another jazz thing. I want to do the, it's like, I might as well just never say, I'm going to slow down and take a break because everything crops up. And there's actually another book in a different series, or not a series, but another book outside of Side Hustle and Flow for next year. So basically, as you had mentioned about the Deeper Grooves radio hour, which came from the Deeper Grooves podcast, the podcast and Side Hustle and Flow book were started during the pandemic at the same time because I just wanted something that was going to keep my mind occupied while we were figuring out when are we going to have music shows. And so the podcast, after doing about 50 or so of them and rotating into the radio show, which is now syndicated on 2 other stations, so it's rotating on 3 stations now. I took all of those great podcast interviews and condensed them into what I call quote unquote cliff notes for each artist. So in like 4 to 5 pages, maybe about 4 to 5 minutes of listening in the audiobook, you can get bite-sized chunks about each artist, really showing the through line that even though their paths are nonlinear and different, that you can aspire to be a great artist from learning from great artists, many of them who have gone on to win Grammys and a bunch of other stuff. So it was cool to be able to repurpose that content because you always get different audiences when you switch mediums. So when I was doing music, then I had people who did music. When I did books, I had people who did books. Now that I'm doing scripts, people who like film, they'll look at that. And so taking the podcast, which people can still listen to, and putting it to a book, it's a different medium to have people digest it differently. And, it doesn't cannibalize each other. Like some people only read books, some people only listen to podcasts, some people do both. And so you get people to be able to get to the content and live where they want to. But I wasn't thinking about doing that, but I just listened back to a lot of that content and said, oh, that'd be a great book. Like it would be, because originally Side Hustle and Flow was based on this previous book, The Art of Awesome. And if you look at the end of Side Hustle and Flow, it's the 4 interviews that I did that ended up not really going into that book that got enveloped into Side Hustle and Flow. And then those interviews also became kind of how the podcast happened. So it was kind of like it all came full circle. And so the book created the podcast created the radio show, and then the radio show and the podcast created another book.
So we know that 2026 will kick off with a new book, and it will kind of wrap up with the Christmas project you were talking about earlier. What's in between that you can talk about?
Well, like I said, I had mentioned that we're working on a covers record, so I'm fairly certain that's going to come out the middle of the year. And so that's exciting. We have done covers for Christmas. We've done covers for jazz. And now this will be kind of like our first full-length R&B soul covers album, which is great coming off of Beach Please, which was our foray back after jazz into the funk. And so, covering Prince and Ray Charles and Bill Withers and all these things that I love, but also really taking a studio album that encapsulates how we are live, because I love to do a lot of mashups and quotations. And so we have so many mashups and quotations in songs within songs within songs, and these little Easter eggs of things that you wouldn't think would necessarily fit together, all smashed into this record. We went to the studio trying to get, I think, 15 songs done, ended up being 11. And so it's a labor of love to be able to get them done, but it sounds great. It's recorded the same place where we did 4 strings. And super excited to be doing that. And then we're working on some pivots to hopefully be getting more into Las Vegas to take the You Showed Me the Way jazz record. And that's going to be kind of its own kind of jazz package as a tribute to Ella Fitzgerald. And so I know for sure we'll be doing Vegas um, about it later in the summer of next year, we'll be doing something in Vegas for sure for that. But we're already getting other shows booked before that. So it's an exciting time to see that you do all this work, you do all this kind of prep with arrangements, and you make these records, and you say, okay, that was good, that was cool. I won some awards, and what else can we do with that? So one of the what else can we do with that is let's package it in the same way we're working on packaging all the holiday stuff to be its own thing. If you remember, we did that virtual concert with the city in 2020, and that's kind of how the Christmas album all came about. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing as an artist to be able to sell packages, because no matter where you go and you have all the charts, you can fly in and out of a place, and you can pick up on land, where you boots on the ground, most of your band to be able to read these charts and play them. So if you want to go to Chicago or New York or Florida or cruise ships or whatever, Europe, etc., then you can do that a little bit more easily. So I had never thought about from the business side packaging in that way. But as I pushed really to focus on kind of I would say the 45 to 75 crowd, the older crowd who likes vinyl, who has money, who will buy tickets that are, $20 to $50 to go see these things. It's interesting working with my agent and figuring out how we're going to do that. But so I'm excited about, definitely there's a funk package, like funk or soul R&B package. There's a jazz package, and there's a holiday package. So with that, hopefully sometime in the future, we will have not only a live of the full jazz experience, and we already have lives of the R&B funk stuff. We'll most likely have a live of our Christmas stuff as well soon.
That's very exciting. What's the best way for people to keep up with you? Social media?
Oh, yeah, social media would be the best. I mean, it's at Cliff Beach Music on all the socials. So X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, at Cliff Beach Music, Cliff Beach Music on YouTube as well. Cliff Beach on all streaming platforms to listen to the music. But yeah, and obviously people, if they want to reach me at the radio station, the SoCal Sound, Cliff at 885fm.org would be the best way. But yeah, if they DM me or they email me, happy to send me songs or feedback or just say hi or ask the questions. And definitely check out the blog, sidehustleandflow.net. Every week we're putting out 5 articles, and so anything they want to know about me is up there, and hopefully just things that inspire and motivate them to again pick up the torch and do their own thing.
I'll put links to I don't know if I can put links to all of those. We'll see. But I'll put a link to a bunch of those anyway down in the show notes. So anybody who's listening, you can just scroll down there, click on any one of those, and you'll be able to find Cliff. And I'll put some links down there too to the new Christmas music and 4 strings. And thank you. Thanks so much for taking so much time with us today.
Oh, Ken, anytime. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, you always get me thinking about Christmas. So I probably would have made half of these things if I didn't know every year there's another great opportunity to promote something new and fresh.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for listening and helping us share some Christmas spirit, and for continuing to support the Sounds of Christmas station and podcast. I already told you how to listen to the station, and you're listening to the podcast now, so my work here is just about done. All of our episodes are available on the Sounds of Christmas website. Just click the podcast tab. And we also have a Linktree page that lists most, if not all, of the streaming sites that carry the Sounds of Christmas podcast. So you can click on that, scroll around and find your favorite, then click on over and subscribe, and you'll never miss another episode. If you have comments or suggestions on this episode, previous episodes, or the Sounds of Christmas station, feel free to reach out to me on social media or through the website. And if you're listening to this episode on your phone, you can also click the Send Us a Text Message link and connect that way. Thanks again. And may you always believe in Santa Claus.